This war didn't have a world title, no Hollywood films, no pop culture memory, but it quietly killed over 500,000 people and reshaped modern Europe. It changed how nations fought, how nurses healed, and how media told the truth. Yet most people today can't even name it. This is the forgotten war. That changed everything. No exaggeration. Just the raw truth, told slowly. Welcome to Still Rise, where we uncover.com. Forgotten moments of history that shaped the world in silence. No noise. Let's begin. Part 1. The silent storm before the war. History doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And those whispers, quietly, change everything. In the middle of the 19th century, Europe stood tall. Its empire stretched across continents. Monarchs ruled vast territories. Diplomats made promises in candlelit rooms. And wars were meant to stay in the past. But beneath this quiet surface, something cracked. In a small peninsula near the Black Sea, tension was quietly building. That peninsula was Crimea. And what happened there between 1853 and 1856 would silently trigger ripples through global alliances, battlefield medicine, international journalism, and empire collapse. This was the Crimean War, the war history chose to forget. Chapter 1. Europe in the 1800s. A powder keg in silence after Napoleon's defeat in 1815, Europe entered a false peace. The Congress of Vienna promised balance. Borders were drawn. Kings toasted, but ambition doesn't follow treaties. Three empires stood in quiet competition. Russia, enormous and hungry for warm water ports. Ottoman Empire, weakened, but still holding strategic ground. Britain, dominant at sea, global in presence. France, rebuilding its pride, and watching closely. Everyone smiled, but everyone was watching. Chapter 2. A spark over stone and faith. The war didn't begin with gunfire. It started with a dispute in a church. In Jerusalem, two Christian factions, the Catholics and the Orthodox, fought for control of religious holy sites. The Church of the Nativity, the Church of the Holy Russia claimed it was defending the rights of Orthodox Christians. France claimed Russia was interfering. The Ottoman Empire, which ruled Jerusalem, was caught in the middle. A religious quarrel? Yes, but everyone knew this wasn't about God, it was about control. Chapter 3. Diplomacy dies in silence. In July 1853, Russia moved into Ottoman territory, the Danubian principalities. They claimed it was temporary. Britain and France protested. The Ottomans hesitated. By October 1853, the Ottoman Empire declared war on Russia. There were no victory speeches, no national anthems, just silence, and soldiers marching toward Crimea. And so, the world stepped into war, almost by accident. A war that nobody fully understood, but one that would change everything. Chapter 4. Crimea, a land caught in the middle. The Crimean Peninsula was never meant to be the center of the world. It was a rugged piece of land on the northern coast of the Black Sea. Strategic, yes, but quiet. That quiet didn't last. By 1854, France, Britain, and the Ottoman Empire had declared war on Russia. But even then, most leaders didn't expect a major land invasion. Yet in September 1854, nearly 60,000 Allied troops landed on the beaches of Crimea. Their target, Sevastopol, the heavily fortified naval base that anchored Russia's Black Sea fleet. They thought it would be a quick march, a fast victory, but Crimea had other plans. Chapter 5. The weather was the first enemy. No one was prepared. Not for the heat of summer, not for the endless mud, and certainly not for the vicious winter that followed. Supplies didn't arrive on time. Tents were scarce. Sanitation was nearly non-existent. Soldiers starved and froze before bullets ever found them. One British commander wrote, "We are not fighting the Russians. We are fighting hunger, cold, and confusion." For many, the Crimean War was not won or lost in battle. It was survived in silence. Chapter 6. The Battle of Alma, where it truly began on September 20th, 1854. Allied troops met Russian forces at the Battle of Alma River. It was the first major confrontation, and a chaotic one. British and French forces attacked Russian positions on high ground. No one truly understood the terrain. No one had clear maps. But after a brutal fight, the Russians The Allies, surprised by their own success, didn't pursue. They marched south, slowly, towards a mistake that would cost thousands of lives. Because what waited in Sevastopol was hell on a hillside. Chapter 7. Sevastopol, the unbreakable fortress. Sevastopol wasn't just a base, it was a fortress, surrounded by thick stone walls, artillery batteries, and Russian troops dug deep into defensive trenches. The Allies expected a city ready to fall. Instead, they found a city ready to resist. A siege began, not for days, not for weeks, but for nearly a full year. Artillery fire shook the skies daily. Disease spread through the camps. Winter returned with sharper teeth. It became clear, no one had come prepared for this. Chapter 8. The Charge of the Light Brigade. A glorious disaster. October 25th, 1854, the Battle of Balaclava, a day that would be remembered for one moment and one mistake. The British cavalry known as the Light Brigade, received an unclear order. They were told to attack, but the wrong target. What followed was one of the most infamous military blunders in history. 600 British cavalry charged directly into a valley lined with Russian artillery. Cannons rained fire from both sides. Men and horses fell, but the Light Brigade miraculously reached the guns. And then, over 250 were killed or wounded in minutes. The world was stunned, and poet Alfred Tennyson later wrote, "Greater than there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die." Chapter 9. The first war the world watched. For the first time in history, a war was not just fought, it was seen. Newspapers in London and Paris sent war correspondents. One man, William Howard Russell of the Times, reported the horrors firsthand. Soldiers without boots, hospitals without care, generals making decisions from faraway hillsides. Russell's reports shocked the public. This wasn't the glorious war they had imagined. This was a disaster. The public demanded change, and someone answered that call. Chapter 10. Florence Nightingale, the woman who lit the dark and the filthy, overcrowded hospitals of Scutari near the front. Wounded soldiers lay in agony. No beds, no bandages, no order. And then came a woman who would change medicine forever. Florence Nightingale, a nurse from England, arrived with 38 volunteers. She scrubbed the floors. She reorganized the wards. She created the first records of sanitation and recovery. And every night, she walked the halls with a lantern in hand. Soldiers called her the lady with the lamp. Under her care, survival rates soared. She would go on to build the foundation of modern nursing. Because of this war, Chapter 11. The siege tightens months passed. The siege of Sevastopol became not just a battle, but a test of endurance. From October 1854 to September 1855, soldiers lived in trenches, not homes. They battled rats and typhus more than enemy rifles. Rain turned fields into mud pits. Winter froze, weapons to hands. Allied bombardments pounded the city, but still, it did not fall. The Russians, outnumbered but dug in, refused to surrender. They built new defenses, they rotated fresh troops, both sides bled quietly, and the world began to wonder, what exactly was being won? Chapter 12. The Battle of Inkerman. The fog of war on November 5th, 1854. A thick fog blanketed the hills near Sevastopol. Out of that fog came tens of thousands of Russian troops. It was their chance to break the siege, to end it all. But they didn't count on the British and French holding their ground, even with inferior numbers. What followed was the Battle of Inkerman, a brutal hand-to-hand slaughter through mud and smoke. Men couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Some fought their own allies by mistake. But when the fog lifted, the Russians had failed. Again, the siege continued. Chapter 13. The final assault by late summer 1855, both sides were exhausted. But on September 8th, French troops launched a final attack on the Malakoff, one of Sevastopol's strongest fortifications. They broke through. After nearly 11 months, the walls cracked, not with an explosion, but with exhaustion. That night, Russian troops began to withdraw from the southern part of They burned their supplies. They sank their own fleet. They did not surrender. But the message was clear. The war was over. Not with cheers, not with banners, just silence, and smoke rising from the harbor. Chapter 14. The Treaty of Paris. Peace. On paper in March 1856, peace was signed in Paris. Russia kept Crimea, but lost power in the Black Sea. They could no longer keep a navy there. The Ottoman Empire kept its land. For now, and the rest of Europe quietly redrew lines and returned home. There were no parades, no great speeches, just diplomats signing a paper, and nearly 500,000 dead left behind. The Crimean War was over, but its lessons were only beginning. Chapter 15. What the world learned. The Crimean War taught the world things no war had before. That outdated tactics would kill modern armies. That media could influence politics. That healthcare and war needed reform. That alliances weren't just about kings, but about public opinion. It was the first modern war, and the last war before the world exploded again in the 20th century. Chapter 16. The Legacy. Echoes in silence. Most people today can't locate Crimea on a map. Even fewer know what happened there. But the war changed. Russia, who began modernizing after its failure, Britain, who reformed its army and medical services, the Ottoman Empire, who began its slow collapse, Florence Nightingale, whose work birthed an entire profession. And journalism, once just political gossip, became a voice for truth on the front lines. The Crimean War was forgotten because it lacked glory, but it matters because it revealed the truth that behind every flag and gun are cold nights, quiet pain, and broken promises. That war doesn't always change maps. Sometimes it changes the way we live, heal, and tell stories. The past doesn't disappear, it lingers, quietly waiting to be remembered. Wars like Crimea may not fill history books or movie screens, but they shaped the world we live in. They remind us that history isn't made by loud voices, but by small decisions, forgotten soldiers, and silent consequences. If this story made you pause, even for a moment, you're already different than most. Subscribe to Still Rise, where we tell the stories no one else does. Stories without noise, without judgment, just truth, slowly revealed. Thank you for watching.